It is totally unacceptable to me when people dump on New York. But how can I stop them when it's plain to see we're dumping on ourselves? We've got to sweep our sidewalks, put our trash in plastic bags, the bags in cans, etc., etc. How can we get the world to respect us if we don't respect ourselves? If you're a New Yorker, then sweep it, can it, bag it, and don't dump on New York.
In 1983, Yul Brynner was at his peak. 4,000 performances as the King of Siam, a special Tony Award, and adoring fans worldwide. Then came the diagnosis that changed everything. As he faced death, he left behind a secret collection of 8,000 photographs, entrusting them to his daughter, Victoria. Now, she's breaking her silence about what these images reveal. Yul Brynner was born on July 11, 1920, in Vladivostok, Russia. This was a chaotic time when the city was part of a short-lived state caught between Soviet Russia and Japan. Yul, whose full name was Yuli Borisovich Brynner, came from a wealthy family. They lived in a huge 4-story mansion, and his parents were rich landowners and silver miners in Siberia. But this life didn't last. In 1922, the Red Army took over Vladivostok, and the family lost everything. Their wealth was confiscated, and their mansion was no longer theirs, though they were allowed to live there for a while. This sudden loss deeply affected Yul, making him someone who would later love crafting stories about his life to escape that reality. As Yul grew older, he began telling incredible stories about his past. He claimed he was born as Taija Khan, the son of a Mongol father and a Roma mother, on the island of Sakhalin. He said his parents had royal blood and that he was somehow connected to Genghis Khan. Sometimes, he even claimed he had been a monk in China, fought in wars, and traveled with a circus. These stories weren't true, but Yul told them with such charm that people believed him. They made him seem larger than life, and he enjoyed the attention. The real story of his childhood was different, but still dramatic. When Yul was just 4, his father left the family to be with another woman, a dancer. This was a tough time for Yul, especially because Russia was in turmoil after the revolution. In 1927, his mother, Marusia, decided to leave Vladivostok with Yul and his sister Vera. They moved to Harbin, China, a city with a large Russian population. In Harbin, Yul went to a school run by the YMCA, where he learned about Western culture while staying connected to his Russian roots. It was also in Harbin that he saw a famous Chinese opera performer who dressed as a woman. This might have been Yul's first taste of the performing arts, something that fascinated him. In 1933, Yul's mother moved the family again, this time to Paris. Yul was now 13, and life in Paris would change him. He didn't do well in school, but quickly learned French and excelled in creative activities. At just 14, he started performing Russian and Roma songs at cabarets. He used a guitar his father had given him when he was younger and often performed with his sister Vera, who was becoming a trained opera singer. These performances helped him build confidence as an entertainer. Yul's life in Paris wasn't just about music. He also joined the circus. He became a trapeze artist at the Cirque d'Hiver, showing off his daring and physical skill. Yul Brynner's journey to becoming a star started in 1941 when he came to the United States with his mother. They reached San Francisco just a month before the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was lucky timing because that attack pulled the U.S. into World War II. After arriving, Yul went to New York City to see his sister Vera. But he didn't stay there long. He moved to Ridgefield, Connecticut, to join an acting school run by Michael Chekhov, a famous director. Yul barely spoke English, but his looks and natural talent stood out. Chekhov gave him a small role in Twelfth Night on Broadway just a few months later. His role in Twelfth Night was a big deal, but the play ended quickly because of the chaos after Pearl Harbor. Still, it helped Yul get noticed in the theater world. After Twelfth Night, Yul had a hard time finding work. For 2 years, he didn't act in any plays, but he used this time to practice and improve. He kept learning with Chekhov and stayed involved in New York's theater scene. Finally, in 1943, he got a small role in a comedy called The Moon Vine. The play only lasted 20 performances, but it helped him get more attention. His big moment came in 1946, when he was cast in Lute Song, a musical about an ancient Chinese story. He played a young scholar named Tsai Yong. The play ran for 142 shows, and Yul's performance made people notice him. It was also the first time he tried shaving his head, which later became his signature look in The King and I. In 1949, Yul had made his film debut in a movie called Port of New York. He played a villain named Paul Vicola, a cold and smart drug kingpin. The movie wasn't very successful, but Yul stood out. At this point, he still had a full head of hair, which makes this role look very different from his later ones. Critics said he was magnetic, and it was clear he had something special. Even though it took 7 more years for him to do another movie, this performance showed his potential. In the meantime, he focused on acting on stage and directing TV shows for CBS. At the time, TV was new and exciting, and Yul wanted to be part of it. He worked on many different kinds of shows, including dramas like Danger and Studio One. He even directed a puppet show for kids called Life with Snarky Parker. The show didn't last long, but it showed that Yul wasn't afraid to try new things. While directing, he also trained other new directors, sharing what he had learned. In 1951, Yul Brynner's life changed forever when he was chosen to play King Mongkut in the Broadway show The King and I. At first, Yul wasn't even thinking about acting on stage. He was working as a TV director and didn't really want to leave that. But his friend Mary Martin thought the role was perfect for him and told him to audition. Yul read the script and was immediately drawn to the character. King Mongkut was strong, complicated, and full of life, and Yul felt connected to him. When he auditioned for the creators, Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein II, he completely blew them away. His commanding presence, his unique looks, and his deep voice made them sure he was their king. Yul made a bold choice before the show even started. He shaved his head. It was risky, but it changed everything. When he walked on stage for the first time with his shiny, bald head, the audience gasped. It was unforgettable. That look became part of who Yul was for the rest of his life. And it wasn't just his appearance that grabbed attention. His performance was powerful. He played the proud and conflicted King Mongkut with so much energy that people couldn't look away. His scenes with Gertrude Lawrence, who played Anna, were full of chemistry and emotion, and audiences were mesmerized. The show opened on March 29, 1951, and became a huge hit right away. Yul's performance was praised by everyone, and it made him a star overnight. Yul loved playing King Mongkut so much that he kept coming back to the role for more than 30 years. Over his career, he performed as the king an incredible 4,625 times. It all started with the original Broadway run, which lasted from 1951 to 1954, and included 1,246 performances. But Yul wasn't done. He took part in many revivals and tours, perfecting the role every time. Even when he was sick with lung cancer, he kept performing because he was so dedicated. His last performance as King Mongkut was on June 30th, 1985, when he was 65 years old. That final show was an emotional moment. The audience gave him a long standing ovation while the orchestra played Auld Lang Syne. It was the perfect way to honor his legendary run. In 1956, Yul brought King Mongkut to the big screen in the movie version of The King and I. The film was a massive success, both critically and financially. Yul's performance was just as captivating on screen as it was on stage. His chemistry with Deborah Kerr, who played Anna, was touching and real. While Deborah's singing was dubbed, Yul's deep voice remained his own, making his character even more authentic. The movie was beautiful to look at too, with stunning costumes and sets that brought 19th century Siam to life. The film was nominated for 9 Academy Awards and won 5. Yul himself won the Oscar for Best Actor. It was his first nomination, and he won it with his unforgettable performance. His success in the movie made him a Hollywood icon and solidified his place in history. Everywhere people saw him, they thought of King Mongkut. That role became a part of him, and his portrayal is still remembered and celebrated today. In 1956, Yul Brynner's life completely changed. He became one of the biggest Hollywood stars thanks to 2 huge movies that came out that year, The 10 Commandments and Anastasia. These 2 films showed how talented and versatile he was, making him famous worldwide. In The 10 Commandments, Brynner played Ramesses II, standing strong against Charlton Heston's Moses. He worked very hard for this role, spending months learning about ancient Egypt and practicing how to speak like an Egyptian ruler. People loved how he made Ramesses feel like a real person, not just a bad guy. Brynner even did his own stunts. In one dangerous scene, his chariot flipped over. He barely escaped getting seriously hurt, but he kept going because he wanted everything to feel real. In Anastasia, Brynner played General Bonin, a character that was completely different from Ramesses. The movie told the story of whether Anastasia, the youngest daughter of the last Russian Tsar, had survived the revolution. This role felt personal to Brynner because his own family had escaped Russia during that time. He used their story to bring real emotion to the character. His performance was so good that some Russian immigrants thought he had lived through the events himself. Both movies were big hits. The 10 Commandments made over $120 million, an enormous amount back then, and Anastasia also did well. Brynner's hard work paid off, not just in fame, but also in money. He earned $200,000 for the 10 Commandments, which was like $2 million today. A few years later, in 1960, Brynner starred in The Magnificent Seven. This is the role many people think of as his best. He loved a Japanese movie called Seven Samurai and wanted to make it into a Western. He worked hard to make it happen, even buying the rights to remake the film. On set, there was a lot of tension between Brynner and his co-star Steve McQueen. McQueen kept trying to steal the spotlight by doing little things, like kicking dirt onto Brynner's boots during scenes. Brynner got so frustrated he threatened to take off his hat, knowing his famous bald head would grab all the attention. Despite the behind-the-scenes drama, their rivalry added to the movie's excitement. The film became a classic and made a huge impact, even inspiring sequels, TV shows, and commercials. Even though Brynner was a huge star, he struggled with being typecast. People loved his unique look and strong presence, but that made it hard for him to get different types of roles. In 1969, he tried to change his image in The File of the Golden Goose, where he played a U.S. Secret Service agent. To look different, he grew out his hair and dyed it blonde. The movie didn't do well, and Brynner went back to his usual style. In 1973, he took a clever risk with Westworld. He played a robotic gunslinger, which turned his heroic cowboy image into something scary and unforgettable. The movie became a cult favorite, but it didn't lead to more variety in his roles. Yul Brynner wasn't just an actor. He loved photography and made it a big part of his life. It all started in the 1940s when he got his first camera, a Leica. Over the years, he took thousands of photos, over 8,000 in total. He captured personal and beautiful moments, his co-stars, his family, and the world around him. One of his inspirations was Henri Cartier-Bresson, a famous photographer who loved taking real, natural pictures. Yul liked black and white photos that felt alive. Some of his best ones were of Elizabeth Taylor during The Buccaneer and Audrey Hepburn on the set of The Sound and the Fury. His photos were honest and full of emotion. In 1978, Yul made a photography book called Bring Forth the Children. It showed pictures of refugee children living in camps across Europe and the Middle East. These photos came from his work with the United Nations, where he tried to help kids and raise awareness. People praised the book for being powerful and heartfelt. Then, in 1983, Yul combined his love for food and photography with another book, the Yul Brynner Cookbook. It had 70 recipes inspired by the cultures he loved: Russian, French, Thai, and more. He even took all the pictures himself. But Yul wasn't just about photos. He was passionate about music, too. At 14, his father gave him a guitar, and he took it everywhere. He taught himself to play and even got some lessons from Django Reinhardt, a legendary guitarist. Yul loved Russian folk songs, gypsy music, and jazz. In the 1940s, before becoming a big star, he performed in nightclubs in Paris and New York, using the name Yul Brynner. In 1967, he recorded an album called The Gypsy and I. It had 13 gypsy songs, and people loved it. One of his best performances was on The Ed Sullivan Show, where millions watched him play two guitars. Yul's music often found its way into his movies. In Anastasia, 1956, he sang and played Russian folk songs. In The Magnificent Seven, 1960, he insisted on playing his own guitar during a scene by the campfire. He loved being authentic and made sure everything felt real. Yul also had a gift for languages. He grew up speaking Russian, French, and English, and later learned Japanese, Hungarian, and Italian. During World War II, he worked as a French radio announcer, sending messages to occupied France. He translated news live on air, helping millions of people understand what was happening. On D-Day, he worked 14 hours straight, telling people about the Allied invasion of Normandy. His calm voice reassured many during a scary time. His language skills helped in acting too. In Anastasia, he spoke both English and Russian. For Solomon and Sheba, 1959, he learned some ancient Hebrew to make his role feel real. He even re-recorded his narration in multiple languages for a UN documentary. In his personal life, Yul often mixed Russian, French, and English when he talked. It made him unique and charming. Yul Brynner's life was full of ups and downs, and his struggles started when he was very young. At just 16 years old, in 1936, he hurt his back badly while working as a trapeze acrobat in a French circus. The pain was so terrible that he started using drugs to cope. By the time he was 17, he was addicted to opium, and his life began to spiral. His family knew they had to help. They sent him to Switzerland for treatment, and his aunt, who was a doctor, paid for it. Yul stayed in rehab for a whole year. It wasn't easy. The doctors used hypnotherapy, which was a new method back then. Slowly, he fought his way out of addiction. After he finished treatment, he never touched drugs again, but addiction stayed a part of his life. Later, he became addicted to cigarettes, and sadly, this led to lung cancer, which he was diagnosed with in 1983. It's heartbreaking that after beating one addiction, another one took such a toll on his health. Yul's personal life was as dramatic as his career. He got married 4 times, and every marriage brought new twists to his story. His first wife was Virginia Gilmore, an actress. They got married in 1944 and had a son named Rock in 1946. Yul gave him the nickname Rock after a famous boxer. This marriage lasted 16 years, but they divorced in 1960. That same year, Yul married Doris Kleiner, a Chilean model. Their love story started on the set of The Magnificent Seven. They had a daughter named Victoria in 1962, and Audrey Hepburn, the famous actress, was her godmother. But this marriage didn't last long and ended in 1967. In 1971, Yul married again, this time to a French socialite named Jacqueline Thion. This period of his life was different. He bought a beautiful old manor house in France and adopted 2 children from Vietnam, Mia and Melody. But even this marriage didn't work out, and they divorced in 1981. His last marriage came in 1983, when he was 63 years old. He married Kathy Lee, a ballerina who was only 24. Despite the big age gap, they stayed together until Yul's death in 1985. Outside of his marriages, Yul also had a daughter named Lark in 1959. She was born from a relationship with a young woman named Frankie Tilden. Lark's mother raised her, but Yul made sure to support her financially throughout his life. Among all his children, Yul had a very special bond with his daughter Victoria. They both loved photography, and it brought them closer together. Yul was passionate about taking pictures and carried his camera everywhere. He taught Victoria how to take great photos, showing her how to frame and compose pictures beautifully. He even shared tricks he learned from famous photographers. Victoria said her dad always supported her and encouraged her creativity. Their shared love for photography became a connection that lasted throughout their lives. Victoria's early memories of her father were shaped by their unusual family life. Her parents separated when she was still very young, and she mostly lived with her mother in Switzerland. Even though they were apart, Yul worked hard to stay close to her. When he wasn't filming far away, he would visit her on weekends or during holidays. One of Victoria's favorite memories was a holiday they took in Spain when she was 10 years old. It was shortly after her parents had separated, and it was one of the first times she spent a trip alone with her dad. During this holiday, they bonded over photography, something they both loved. This shared passion became an important part of their relationship as she grew up. Being the daughter of a famous actor wasn't easy. Victoria often found it hard to spend time with her father without interruptions. Fans would frequently approach him for autographs, even when they were trying to have quiet family moments. This gave her a unique understanding of what fame could do to personal relationships and family time. Still, Victoria remembers Yul as a fun dad who always tried to make their time together special. She recalls how they would play games and take spontaneous car rides with no destination in mind, just enjoying each other's company. Yul Brynner was famous for being hard to work with. People talked about how demanding and moody he could be on movie sets. During the filming of Anastasia in 1956, he acted alongside Ingrid Bergman. She was a little taller than him, and kindly suggested he use a box or prop to make them look the same height. Instead of taking it well, Brynner snapped at her. He said, "I'm not going to play this on a box. I'll show the world what a big horse you are." This comment upset her and made the rest of their time on set uncomfortable. Brynner was also very particular about his surroundings. When he toured with The King and I, he asked hotels to repaint walls in his room a specific shade of tan before he arrived. He also demanded that his kitchenette be stocked with exactly 12 brown eggs, not white ones. These strange requests confused hotel staff everywhere, but they followed his instructions. He also had a habit of competing with his co-stars. On the Ten Commandments set, he became fixated on matching Charlton Heston's muscular build. To keep up, Brynner began working out intensely, transforming his body. But this made things tense between the two because Brynner's determination to measure up turned into rivalry. One of his most famous conflicts happened with Steve McQueen on The Magnificent Seven. McQueen wanted to steal the spotlight and would do little tricks during Brynner's scenes, like flipping coins or adjusting his hat, so people would watch him instead. Brynner noticed and tried to fight back. He even stood on small piles of dirt to look taller than McQueen. But McQueen would secretly kick the piles down between takes, making Brynner furious. Things got so bad that Brynner confronted McQueen on set. Despite the arguments, McQueen later thanked Brynner for letting him stay in the movie. Brynner replied by saying, "I'm the king, and you're the rebel prince." This moment showed their strange mix of rivalry and respect. Brynner's dedication to his work was unmatched. He played King Mongkut in The King and I over 4,600 times in his career. He worked tirelessly to make the role perfect every time. His bald head became his signature look, and he even shaved it twice a day to keep it smooth. This look became so iconic that it influenced other characters, like Professor Xavier in X-Men. Yul Brynner's final years were a mix of incredible success and personal struggles. In the 1980s, he returned to his most famous role as King Mongkut in The King and I. He had first played this role decades earlier, but now, in his 60s, he was back on stage, just as charismatic as ever. He started a big tour in 1981, performing all over the country. Audiences loved him. On September 13, 1983, he celebrated his 4,000th performance as the king at a special party. This showed how dedicated he was to the role. The tour ended with a final Broadway run in 1985, where his wife, Kathy Lee Brynner, joined him on stage. On June 30th, 1985, he performed as the king for the very last time. The audience gave him a long standing ovation, and the orchestra played Auld Lang Syne. It was an emotional goodbye, and it felt like the end of an era. That same year, he received a special Tony Award for his amazing achievement. But during this time, Brynner was facing something much harder. In 1983, he found out he had lung cancer. It couldn't be treated. He had smoked since he was 12 years old, sometimes up to 4 packs a day, and it finally caught up with him. Even though he quit in 1971, the damage was done. Brynner didn't give up, though. He kept performing, even while going through painful treatments. He wanted to use his experience to help others. Before he died, he recorded a message for an anti-smoking campaign. In the ad, he looked straight at the camera and said, "Now that I'm gone, I tell you, don't smoke. Whatever you do, don't smoke." This message aired after he died on October 10th, 1985, and it became one of the most powerful anti-smoking ads ever. People around the world watched it, and it made a big impact. After his death, his daughter, Victoria Brynner, took on the responsibility of preserving his legacy. In 2010, 25 years after his passing, she curated and published his photographic archive in a 4-volume anthology called Yul Brynner, A Photographic Journey. Yul had been an avid photographer, capturing over 8,000 images throughout his life. With encouragement from family friend Karl Lagerfeld, Victoria carefully organized the collection, uncovering her father's artistic vision and love for photography. She secured contributions from notable figures like Martin Scorsese and Bruce Weber, adding depth to the project. The anthology led to exhibitions in New York and Paris, showcasing Yul Brynner as not only a legendary actor, but also a talented photographer.